Welcome to our channel, Check Globe. Today we'll talk about things we have to do to get climate change under control. Let's begin. Do you think it's possible to stop before this 1.5 degree? Is it still reversible?
Yeah. So we already know that keeping the temperature below 1.5, or at least not keeping over 1.5 for a long time, we can still go back, as I said. Basically, we know how much carbon we can release in order this to happen or not happen. And the current projections, also based on IPCC reports, say that if we want to have a reasonable chance to not cross 1.5, by reasonable, well, some people say it's 30%, some people say 30% is too much because you are not going into the plane that has a 30% chance of crashing, right? And you can still survive, but with small chance, right? So, well, the question if it's reasonable, but we are talking about probabilities. So, with reasonable chance that we call, or that we say 30%, not crossing the 1.5 is that we have to reduce carbon emissions, globally speaking, by around half compared to today by 2030, which is, well, less than, 8 years. Yeah, we already have almost half of 2022, right? So it's 7.5 years by 2030. And the question is if it's possible, right? Some people say it is possible. We can significantly reduce carbon emission by 2030 and then continue to zero emissions by 2050. That is what is required for not crossing 1.5 or not crossing it for a long time. Even if we cross it, right, with this probability, we can then still theoretically the temperature will decline if we reach zero emissions, right? So that's what we are talking about. Having half of carbon emission in 8 years and then having zero emissions by 2050. Then it's possible. If this doesn't happen, then your chance of keeping 1.5 or even 2 degrees, right? With 2 degrees, you can have a little bit more carbon. It's basically half degree is equivalent approximately to 10 years of global emissions at current rate.
What should be done to actually be able to do this by 2030, and both not only as individuals but as a society?
Yeah, there are scenarios, again, from IPCC and other reports dealing with this energy transitions, emission trajectories that we call mitigation of climate. There is a special IPCC report on mitigation, even special report on 1.5 that was published in 2018. And, well, you can have a lot of different scenarios. Obviously, all of them require a huge, rapid decline in fossil fuel burning and stopping deforestation. So if you start with deforestation globally, then if you want to keep 1.5, we need to stop deforestation by 2030. So otherwise, only by having some kind of deforestation somewhere on the planet, you are not consistent with your carbon budget, right? So this is required, and then we can ask if that's possible, right? And again, there are people saying yes, we can stop deforestation and keeping people living in Amazonia and having food, and not only Amazonia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on. In theory, that is possible once some conditions are, fulfilled, right? So, intensives to not deforest, to find other ways to feed and so on. We know, based on the past, for instance, in Brazil, in Amazonia, that if you compare it like to 20 or 30 years ago, the deforestation rate was much higher, right? So it can be slowed down, and it happened. Unfortunately, in the past, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, the rate of deforestation, the lowest was around 2005, 2004. Since then, it's slowly increasing again, and in last few years, it's reaching the highest rates over the past 10 years or so. So it's rising again. So it's the opposite trend of what needs to be done. And this is just Amazonia, and we also know there is quite a large deforestation also in Indonesia, in this other tropical regions in Africa, and well, basically what the IPCC says is that we need people that are living there, their knowledge, their practices, because only they can manage the tropical forests sustainably, right? And we need to support them in doing so, in doing that, and it's possible. But we have very short time to do that, right? So 8 years is nothing. It's like less time by 2030 than it was since 2010, right? And we already are talking about reducing carbon and stopping deforestation. So I would say I'm skeptical if it would be achieved by 2030. But even if we just reduce it, it would be success. Because globally speaking, the deforestation is still not even slowing down. It's still slightly increasing. We can even plant a new forest, right? We call it secondary forest. Well, it's still forest. It's not like completely destroyed, but it's degraded and it's low biodiversity, low carbon content, and so on. So we need to stop before at least the primary forest, right? It should be protected 100%. So that's one region where we need to reach complete stop of what we are doing or changing it to something sustainable. And then, of course, crucially so is the stopping or starting to reduce fossil fuels combustion. Right. So, and we have these scenarios, energy scenarios, and the most important is coal. Coal is the most carbon-intensive fuel from the fossil fuels. It has higher carbon footprint than oil and higher than natural gas. So first, we need to stop coal first, right? And different countries have different plans how or when to stop coal use, coal burning in coal power plants. Europe is the most progressive. Most of countries have plans to stop coal. Some of them already did, like Sweden and I think Australia and maybe some others. Denmark already stopped. So that's what we say, they are coal neutral. They are not using coal anymore, and they were. UK is also very low on coal. I think at some point they already reached zero coal, but it was just on some days. But I'm not sure about this. But basically, they already depleted their coal. It was they started the Industrial Revolution. It was the first country to burn coal and steam engine and so on. So they have burned all of their coal already. Which is good, but it's just to say that they didn't decline the coal intentionally, right? Because they just didn't have enough of it. So the countries, most of the European countries are saying or planning that they will stop coal between 2025 2030, which is basically in line or at least as close as possible to this 1.5 limit. Right? If the whole planet stopped coal by 2030, it would be very close to 1.5 and definitely 2 degrees, right? Or something in between. So that's the condition, to stop coal globally 2030. 2025 is optimal, but probably that's impossible, right? But it would be much better to stop it in let's say 3 years. But there's still a huge coal burning around the world. Europe is, as I said, most progressive. China, which is important in terms of global energy, obviously, is the largest energy consumer, even larger than US. So they recently said that because they were never, in the past, they were never talking about carbon neutrality, they were just talking about peaking carbon emissions, and their peak date was 2030. And now they are saying they want to reach carbon neutrality by 2060, which is less than 40 years from now. That's what they say, right? And I don't know if they can make it or not, but at least they are now saying that they will, they will try to reach this transition. If the countries will fulfill what they say in terms of the energy transition, the projection tells we would get 2.5 warming or so, which is still better than if they don't do it. And the current trajectory tells it the warming will be more than 3 degrees, right? So we are on the trajectory, we are more than 3 degrees, which would be catastrophic, obviously. But the governments are saying we want to reduce, that would put us on 2.5. So we need further more stringent or more, more of the reducing of carbon emissions, more mitigation. And so some of the governments are saying, okay, we will do more, right? Like this China, they changed from peaking to reaching neutrality. The other significant country that changed their energy policy was India. For the first time in the Glasgow Climate Conference, they said they will limit coal. In the past, they were not talking about limiting coal at all, right? So, and gas. And the recent study that was considering these new commitments, right? So, or pledges, what countries say they will reach in the future, including, this India, China, and developed parts of the world, Japan and the West. The calculation was like we could limit warming below 2 degrees if this happens. The problem is that there is difference between what countries or governments say, and the other thing is what's happening on the ground. So it's not the same, right? So if you look at current global emission trajectory, let's say up to beginning of 2022, that we have the latest data on global carbon emission, we are not consistent with this what we aim to, that is 1.5 or even 2 degrees, right? So the governments are not in line with their commitments. But if they were, and if they will do what they say in the future, then we can still be close to 2 degrees or even 1.5, right? But the question is if it will happen. So going back to what it requires to be done, I told that for the coal it means we need to stop coal by 2030 globally at the latest. If you cross it by 1 year, then your carbon budget is over, right? And you cannot do it anymore. In terms of oil, that is cars, and basically aircrafts and ships. So we use oil for 90% of transport, and some production for pharmaceuticals and plastics. But we need to deal with that as well, but primarily we are talking about transporting sector. Then we are talking about 2035, 2040 the latest. So the idea is that we have to stop producing cars that are using internal combustion engine from 2030. And 2035 in the developing countries and the latest. So ideally, globally, we should stop producing cars in, again, less than 10 years by 2030. We can still use the cars that they produced in these 8 years by 2030, but we shouldn't be producing even one more car, right? So stopping 2030, 2035, let's say in developing countries. So it's a really short period of time to change your car industry. Currently, you have, I don't know, between 1 to 2% of cars that are electric or hybrid or I don't know, hydrogen. So basically non-carbon based fuel, right? So it's still not on the trajectory. But this needs to be done. And then the last thing is natural gas, which is probably actual today, and a lot of people are talking about it. Is natural gas, and that we should stop using similarly to oil, right, by 2030. 2050 should be carbon neutral already. Right? So first coal, then oil, and then last natural gas to stop it. So that's what's required. And generally we talk about developed countries, which are rich countries, the West, Europe, Canada, US, Japan, and even increasingly so China. It's already being considered as developed, as much as developing. And then the rest of the world is what we say developing. So we still want to keep more carbon for them than for us. As rich countries, we should do more than the poorer part of the world. So we should aim for closer dates to stop using coal, to stop using fossil fuels, and then to have more time for this energy transition.